Hello, everybody, and welcome. Welcome to a special edition of Top in Tech, where those of you who follow us regularly will know that we always talk about technology, digital, AI, lost jobs, opportunities to be carved out, right? Drone economy, which Malaysia is obviously a world leader in now. But today's topic is totally macro, right? We're going to be talking about our very important 12 Malaysia plan, and the midterm review, and what can we expect, what can we not expect, and what do you expect? So some of you have already sent in questions, and for those of you who want to submit your questions live, please do so, and the panelists will be more than happy to answer your questions, right? Because this is a very participative and two-way engagement, right, between you and the rest and the panelists, which we have now. So what we're going to do is we've got three panelists, and you would have already seen from the flyers that we're now promoting the event. We've got a representative from the Ministry of Economy, and we've got two economists who are like world leaders, right, in their space, highly respected. Definitely in Asia, they're highly respected. So I'm going to have each of them just come on one by one quickly, right, to share a maximum of 3 minutes, right, introduce themselves and their top of line thinking about this topic also. And then we'll have all three of them come on the screen with me, and we're going to get started with questions. So I'm going to start off with Dr. Nungsari first.
Hello, Karamjit. Difficulties trying to get my video started.
No problem.
Okay.
The audio is crystal clear. That's more important.
All right. Okay. Thank you. So I'll just say this for opening. Okay. I think the Malaysia plan has always been about allocations for development expenditure.
Yes.
For the 5-year period, and development expenditure represents public investments, installing new capacity in the economy and so on. So I think, given that's what it is, I think it ought to be it's timely to review it now because when it was first, the 12 plan was first drafted, it was drafted by a different government. So, and now we have a different government. So I think that's one reason for why it's timely to actually do a review. On top of the normal reason for why EPU and now Ministry of Economy, they do midterm reviews anyway. So it's quite timely because, the new government have to own the remaining part of the 12 Malaysia plan.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And then the second reason, I think, because this new government has also announced its economy Madani framework.
Yeah.
So the remaining 2 years, I think the framework defined targets for the next 10 years or so. It has some KPIs or milestones that it wants to achieve. So I think the remaining 2 years of this 12 Malaysia plan ought to be channeled towards achieving some of those targets, because then the ownership of those targets by the present government. And I think thirdly, I think Dr. Zunika would know this more, but it's also timely because part of the economy Madani agenda is to look at fiscal reforms. So and I think it is also therefore timely because the allocation for development expenditure is part of fiscal expenditure.
Yeah.
The government is going to do a consolidation of fiscal situation, both revenue side and expenditure side. So it is timely, therefore, to do a reform now on what would constitute to be the development expenditure portion of the fiscal spend, because then the fiscal will be looking at both revenues, tax and non-tax revenues, as well as expenditures, operating expenditures, subsidies and gaji, emolument and whatever not, including therefore development expenditure. I think for those reasons, it is timely to do this midterm review, apart from the fact that the ministry always does a midterm review.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you. So let's bring on Dato Dr. Zunika now, who is a Deputy Secretary with the Ministry of Economy and Under Policy. So and she's I'm going to be subsequently calling her Dr. Zu. So Dr. Zu, can you just join and share your quick thoughts with us?
Thank you. Thank you, Karamjit.
No
I can simply follow through what Dr. Nungsari mentioned just now in terms of the timeliness of introducing the mid-term review of the 12th Malaysia Plan. No doubt 12th Malaysia Plan was tabled in Parliament on the 27th of September 2021. So 2 years has gone by and lots of things has happened in these 2 years. Particularly, we are facing not only internal but also external challenges in terms of post-COVID impact, the stagnant of our economic growth, and the challenges from the Ukraine-Russian conflict. This has actually impacted not only the economy side but also on the socio side of our population. So the perspective that we're taking not only as what Dr. Nungsari mentioned about the need to do the review in taking on board the new focus of the new government that has been in power since the 15th general election last. And with this unity government, we see that actually there is a demand for transformational development, of which has not been taken into account in the last 12th Malaysia Plan formulation. So in short, mid-term review actually is the time for reflection and time to check whether we are being current in looking at where we are now, where we want to go next. And then the question that we are also asking is, are we doing the right thing in terms of policy and strategy? And are we doing the right way in terms of how we do things? So I'm there in this intro.
You're
session.
in the thick of things, okay, man. And
Yes.
you're the apex, man, you and your ministry. So, okay, that's interesting. Together, of course, MOF. All right, cool. Thank you very much. So, let's just quickly have Dr. Rajah now, right? Rajah with a H. He is very specific to tell me to pronounce his name, Rajah with a H. Doc, you want to add anything that Nung has not added? Because him going first, right? He got all the main, bullet points in there.
Yeah, I have something to say.
Excellent.
I'm also an ACFIN member. Now, the things that I'd like to say is you can't possibly have a plan in such a short time change drastically. And therefore, I don't expect a major change as such over the next 2 years. Okay. But let's also remember that much of it is targeted towards achieving targets that we're expecting in 2030, not just what we saw in the shared prosperity vision, but also in achieving developed status through our fourth industrial master plan. But the first thing I would say that in terms of what I've seen somewhat different from the 400 billion 12th Malaysia plan that Datuk Sri Mustafa Mohamed presented in 2021 is the fact that the deliverables look like they're much more focused. They're much more focused. And then, although, of course, each of these governments have emphasized the importance of people, Satu Malaysia to Madani Malaysia, but you also see that the notion of empowerment seems to be much more incisive in the way you can gather from the Madani principles that have been put across as transformational, which Dr. Zunika addressed just now. The second point I'd like to mention is the fact that there is more focused, attention given to digitalization and climate resilience, not just the tech things about numbers and so on, but also which is visible in the fourth industrial master plan to create 3.3 million high-skilled jobs, and to see that the manufacturing sector deepens and establishes more linkages. I see those things there. Of course, we don't know exactly what will happen, but we will come to that later. The last point I'd like to mention, which Dr. Nung alluded to, is the fact that over the last 25 years, we have had a trend worsening in the deficit between debt and revenue. That has to come to a stop. And unless we allow that to go on, that will crash. And I think Dr. Nung mentioned that And I think, and I hope this government, and I'm not blaming the civil service at all, working with them, I see that they're all profoundly capable, competent. It's a question of how government implements that. And I think this government, in the way it has taken on the 12th Malaysia Plan, in the way it strategizes, looks like, to me, they will bring about a reversal in the growing deficit. Because at the moment, you have debt growing faster than revenue. Yeah. It's a matter of time it will crash. But what they have done so far suggests to me that this is the first time we will be grappling with that seriously.
Okay. Very good. Thanks a lot, man. So, Dr. Zhu was saying that, it's this government now is looking at things from a transformational development perspective. So when you use the word transformation, it's a big word, right? Absolutely. It means rapid changes. But let's have all the other, all the panelists on screen also. But you are saying that because it's just not possible to have, large and big changes done, because it's 2 years is not a long time when you talk about, the economic policy and, moving the gears and levels of government, right? And policy to help. So kind of interesting. So I'm creating some tension between you and Dr. Zhu here, right? Dr. Zhu says transformation development, so which is a new term, but it's aspirational also. But let's get started very quickly now. We're going to answer questions that have been asked already, but I'm going to quickly just ask a question that has brought us all here together at the very topic of this panel, right? Which is not just how is the Malaysia Plan faring. I won't ask that because Dr. Nung and Dr. Rajah cannot tell you because there's not enough data for them to answer a decent question. Dr. Zhu has an unfair advantage, so I'm not going to ask that. I'm going to ask the second part of that, right? So Dr. Nung, I'll start with you. Do you feel that major revisions are required for the next 2.25 years, 7 quarters moving forward? And is government actually capable of being that nimble and agile to make those adjustments? Or we should pick wins, right, where we can and then worry about the rest later?
I think all governments that we've had so far, by and large, have wants to do the right thing, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so actually then each government has their own set of policies, but they are somewhat different priorities. I'm sure that quite a bit of overlap in terms of what they want for the country, but there are also different emphasis that's being put. I think Dr. Zunika used the word, maybe this government wants to do somewhat be more transformational development. Yep. So I would probably allude with a couple of things that I see that might be a somewhat different emphasis than I wouldn't allude to the overlaps, the similarities, but the differences. I think one of which actually is the target that's been specified in Economy Madani is to increase the female labor force participation rate. I mean, we have you have 3 males and 1 female here, but actually for the country, the female part of the country is actually of a higher human capital quality than the male part, but the labor participation rate of females in this country is quite low at 55%, male is at 82%. So increasing female labor force participation rate is actually a key thing in the Madani thing, which would require a bit of more thinking and therefore allocation of resources. And then the other bit that I think that is part of the Madani thing is to which is transformational, which instead of just looking at growth, it's trying to look at actually how to increase the share of labor to income. Because that's, if you define low wages and inequality of income distribution as a problem, targeting growth, just growth will just answer one part of the equation. The other part of the equation is how that growth is being distributed between the factors of production. So one of the indicators is to look at what is the share of labor income to total income. So that's another transformational kind of objective that should be given priorities to. I know it's 2 years, but the Economy Madani is being defined on a 10-year horizon. So those are the 2 things that came to my mind of. And then the other one, which I'll say one which is similar, which is actually the emphasis on small and medium enterprises, even micro and small medium enterprises of the previous government and this government. So the question is not what, the question is more in terms of how. So I'll stop there for now.
Okay, all right, very good.
You're lost.
I think I want to ask Dr. Zhu, I said, right? Because he's got that advantage. But let me just jump to Dr. Rajah. What do you think? Are major revisions required from what you feel or what you're in your conversations?
I wouldn't really refer to them as major as such,
Okay.
but you can clearly see distinct differences.
Okay.
One of which is the Madani government, as I mentioned earlier, emphasizes empowerment.
Yeah.
Empowerment of the people. And by doing so, they are also addressing the attempt to change the structure. Dr. Nung alluded to that by increasing the share of income that goes to labor. Here they have distinctly placed it as 40% of GDP. That's quite clear. In other words, they are looking at reducing inequality there itself. But it's also important to note that the vision of Madani government is already visible to me, because when I went to Bernama TV, I think Dr. Nung was also there at that session.
Okay.
This is just after the budget. You saw the Prime Minister presenting quite clearly why he suspended MRT3. Reason being, he needed money to help the poor. He rather shifts that money to address the problems of the poor, including raising the amount of money given to the poor to 3,500 from 2,100. That's quite obvious in terms of where the focus of this particular government is. And if they end up doing that, I think one serious problem that many countries have faced, the US and Britain in particular, we will address problems of inequality.
Okay, interesting. I actually, when I saw that big jump also, I started to think, in the US, especially the tech titans, right, the billionaires, they have been long talking about UBI, right? It's time for their countries to introduce universal basic income, which is kind of an interesting experiment. I know, definitely, our two economies will know that there was a pilot done in Finland, right? And they did it for a year, and the results were kind of surprising. So I'm wondering whether this big hike will naturally lead to eventual conversations happening around that, because you have to start a conversation first, right? And then only you maybe start getting more serious. So kind of interesting how things are going. But okay, now coming to let's move on to the questions, right? There are lots of really good questions, and I'm going to start with Dr. Nung, right? So we're going to take it the way I introduced them for them to come in. So Dr. Nung, how does our economy Madani, right, differ from previous economic models and frameworks in Malaysia?
I think even Rajah has alluded to some departure points that are different. But I think one crucial way to think about the difference between Madani's approach and the previous ones is actually, if you accept that economic outcomes are dependent on social inputs, if you accept that economic outcomes are just dependent on social institutions, strength of norms and values in societies, then the Madani departure point is exactly that. It's that you have to sort out the prerequisite to economic growth, equitable economic growth, even robust economic growth. It depends on how robust the social framework is. I mean, if we are kind of screwed up at the society level, there's no way, if you have institutions that don't function, or societies that don't gel well, then our institutions are not good. So then we're not going to produce the kind of economic outcomes that we desire. So actually, Madani is just civilizational, which is actually based on values. I think Rajah and I have had conversations before. I mean, this is more like institutional economics, the dependency on strength of institutions, on lowering of transaction costs, on adding more social capital on top of human capital and financial capital into the production of the economy. So that's what's different. Therefore, it emphasizes certain things like more equitable growth as opposed to just growth, greater participation of those who are marginalized, an emphasis on strengthening the floor, the social safety net, and while also not ignoring raising the ceiling, but actually making sure that people are on a strong floor. So that sort of thing. I mean, if we sort things out at that level, then and government does not to have heavily involved and empower society to do things, non-profit, not civil societies can join private sectors and government to actually do things that we've seen during PKP and during the floods of December 2021. So if you do that, and then the economic outcomes will come to being. And then the important thing, a part of the Madani speech, was actually to emphasize on regional competitiveness, was for us to create more firms that are regionally competitive, and that's the only way to break the cycle of low income and domestication of the economy. So that's in a nutshell what the approach is, and how it differs slightly from the previous government policy emphasis.
Yeah, I think when you talk about us, the economy modeling framework, one of its key drivers is for us to eventually become, a strong, regional economic leader. I mean, Fahmi, who's the minister for economy, minister for digital, right, communication and digital, likes to say that he said Malaysia must be a digital tiger. We used to be a tiger economy, now digital tiger coming up. So okay, but there are those aspirations there. But honestly, I've heard the two of you talk, and you use the word equitable, social. But I mean, life is not fair and balanced, right? And I don't think there is this this dream of equitable growth can ever happen, right, without very strong government intervention. So you can see how the ebb and flow of business, right, and investments coming, and it just seems that everything is people who've got a more, not just higher education, a very like technical oriented education seem to have advantage, and not at a degree, right, even at the diploma hands-on level, right, to work with things, and you can make all these digital things work. Very interesting how the weight seems to be shifting there, but that's what's going on. I see, right, especially in the tech space, no wonder, right, the tech guys are the ones saying you must introduce UBI. But let's move on to a question for Dr. Zhu, right? And the first one, it is almost 101, and it's actually a good question, right? Sometimes you try to jump too far ahead, and let's all of us hear about how the midterm review is conducted, and what's going to be the focus of this review, because that's like getting a little bit, giving us a glimpse, pulling back the covers into the nuts and bolts of how it's actually done. Is it like you just pay McKinsey 4 million ringgit and then they do it for you, and then you come out and, hey, okay, this is it, right? It looks very good, or there's a lot more blood and sweat involved here, and tears.
Thank you. This time around, Karamjit, everything is done internally. In order to come up with this midterm review, actually, it has been undertaken through the whole of Malaysia concept.
Okay.
We involve everybody, actually. We have 202 sessions.
202.
Ministries.
Wow.
Yes, with ministries, government agencies, international bodies, and also 14 sessions with state agencies, private sector, CSOs, academia, as well as grassroots leaders to get inputs and to get their perspective into what actually they want from the economic development. And through this exercise, actually, the focus that we gave on the review actually is threefold. One is to keep track of the progress. How far have we gone and what went wrong, actually, in terms of the policy, whether we have new issue, whether we have new challenge that has become a stumbling block in ensuring that we can achieve the set targets. And also to identify new policy strategies and initiatives in meeting the broad objective set in the economic development. And I would like to also touch upon the point earlier in terms of whether we are doing a major revision or not. Actually, I could say that what we are doing actually in terms of introducing new policy and measures are something that is going to be major. But taking into account the years that actually is just 2 years, it can be just a starting point. But it will be a major decision that can reflect a better outcome later on and can be continued into the 13th Malaysia Plan. So one of the example that we actually is taking the step now actually is in terms of looking at progressive wage.
Oh,
Actually, it is a
yeah.
very major decision by the government. But we are taking initial step in introducing this structural change that can actually improve not only productivity but also wages and the standard of living of our population later on.
Okay.
So that's from the perspective how we are taking the exercise on board.
Okay. And then I guess again, the focus, is there like a particular sector focus, or will be a horizontal focus then?
Actually, when we're talking about the 5 Malaysia plan, the scope actually is everything. It will go into the economy, the socio aspect in terms of education, health, safety, security, and as well as the need to be sustainable.
Yeah, that's a big one. I mean, yeah.
So it's multiple dimension and across sectors in terms of the scope that we are looking at.
I kind of had this visual, right? There's like a war room, right? Instead of a war room, it's the economic, pulse of the economy, right? Room, and you've got all these data coming out from various screens, and they automate, and everybody's feeding in data, right? On a monthly basis, right? Not real time. And that will decide, at the midterm review, what are the core areas you need to focus on, because the data is flashing orange or flashing red there, right? The green one means, okay, carry on as usual. So, but that's an ideal state like at some point, right? Where real time you can see these things happening. But let's maybe move on to a question for Dr. Rajah, right? So I know we had 3 conversations, and you said that the previous way in how midterm reviews were done, right, had changed, and not just recently, right, over like a few governments ago. You want to elaborate on it and share your concerns with the audience also?
Thank you, Karamjit. I'm also using my experience advising Vietnam, Cambodia, and Laos PDR on development plans. Now, I think the time midterm reviews were done during Tun Razak, as well as Tun Husseinon. I'm very much a guy who supports what was done at that time. Much of it was done internally, though they had advice from the World Bank, as well as advices from Harvard and so on. But let me just mention that between 1970 and 1980, although circumstances were difficult, we had the first oil crisis, we had the second oil crisis.
Yeah.
At the first oil crisis, we didn't have much oil. Inflation was fairly high. But the recalibration, the review that was done, addressed the problems of the parastatals, whether they were catching up, in ensuring that rice production went up, in ensuring that there was connectivity between the farmers and markets, middlemen problems were removed, a whole range of other things, so much so parastatals like Falda became world famous.
Wow.
In fact, the South Korean president, Park Chung-hee, sent his men, learned, adapted, and launched it in 1972 at Busan. But Sema Lundong remains a powerful parastatal instrument that supports Korean agriculture. Where have we moved? Now, let me mention that the subsequent development plans emphasize largely the global economy, whether the US growth rates are falling or interest rates are going up, and then our policies tended to adapt to that. What gradually disappeared to me were the problems of the poor, the parastatals.
Okay.
What was happening to, although of course I know Dr. Nung did a study, which is still kept confidentially. I didn't get to look at it on, how Falda is faring. But let me mention that if only we had continued with that, including, you were talking about digitalization, including ensuring the IR 4.0 proliferated into these sectors, we wouldn't have this kind of problems now, I would say.
Wow.
But my feeling is, if you look at those midterm reviews, and at some point in time, 2010, even that part declined to the point of not existing in those reviews. That to me is bad. We need planning, of course. We need reviews because planning surely means that we are heading to a target in the future.
In the future.
That obviously requires us to do planning. But in addition to just looking at the external economy to see how that would affect our national economy, we have to also see if our plans work. Now, the gradual abandonment of small-scale farming, which is really farming that requires intensive farming, is one of the reasons why we have, from 1989 till now, chronic deficit in food trade. That's exactly why, to me, we have chronic deficit. The second point there is we were very happy between 1991 and 1997 when the ringgit crashed.
Oh,
our GDP on average was growing by about 9% per annum.
Okay.
What we didn't realize at that time, we often mentioned what economy membahang. Our economy was overheating. To the point of getting independent power supply to all sorts of things. Now, those were bad years to me, even though the GDP grew.
Oh.
Right? Because the capital account was strong. Lots of foreign direct investment, lots of foreign equity investment meant the ringgit remained high, 2.4 ringgit to a dollar. Many people thought that's the strength of the Malaysian economy, but it actually undermined our food industry because imports became really cheap. This is the problem of Dutch disease. I'm not going to use this as a technical school, but just to make the point, those reviews should really have embraced these things. And I'm hoping that this government and whichever government that takes over addresses all these problems so that we will not have to face such a wall too quickly.
So you're saying we need to see the picture as it really is, right? And
yes.
Again, okay.
What's coming out from the ground is important. Yeah.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. I wish you had not mentioned the US dollar exchange rate 2.4 because on Saturday I got to go and change my ringgit to US dollar before I go for a trip to the US. I'm dreading that. So okay, never mind. But sir, Dr. Nung, now I've got a question for you, right? And Rajah, I want to ask this to you also after this, which is, how can we assure a skeptical public, right, that this midterm review and this even that is going to happen now is not a mere PR exercise, but that serious thought and analysis, right, have gone to shape the review and also the framework of our economy madani. It's like every government that comes in wants to put their own tagline, right? So is this just how do you reassure them that this is it's not mere PR? Because people can get cynical very easily, especially against towards politicians. So how would you take this question? What is your view of this, Dr. Nung? Okay, you're on mute, sir. Still on mute.
Okay. Now, every government, this is a political context. Every government would like to put their own branding or positioning onto policies. And if you look back since, say, 1990, Mahathir's Vision 2020, Najib's new economic model, and even now, everybody wants to do the right thing. I think there's enough thinking, articulation, analysis, and so on. What has been lacking, and so what we failed to achieve the Vision 2020, right? That's one. And then the new economic model got stuck with ETPs and all these projects. So now we are where we are. So the real challenge, and then of course the unity government wants to have its own branding. It has economy madani. So the proof of the pudding is in the eating, right? I mean, it's actually about implementation. It's not about the what or how. Of course, there will be different whats and different hows, but it's actually about the actual doing. Now, the problem is the doing is not going to be easy because the doing is going to be painful and difficult. I think Rajah alluded earlier on fiscal, that our debt is increasing faster than our revenue. Yeah. So we need to take hard decisions. And then we need people to understand that all policy decisions will have trade-offs. There will be trade-offs. There's no such thing as you get. I'm trained as a game theorist. I think one of those trained as a game theorist. So this win-win thing. I don't think there's a win-win solution.
Just like I don't think there's equitable economic growth. You don't think there's a win-win, okay? Man?
Yeah, because
I hope Dr. Zhu or Dr. Rajah will challenge you on this. No win-win, okay?
No, because basically every policy options, and people know the policy options. If you need to increase revenue, you have to increase revenue, broaden the tax, the revenue, and so on. If you need to address the deficit, you have to do both the revenue side and the expenditure side.
Expenditure.
And there's going to be trade-offs, and there's going to be somebody's going to pay the price, somebody's going to benefit from it. So every policy decision will have those trade-offs, and you need government with the confidence, the wherewithal, the courage to actually take those hard decisions. Because the longer we delay some of these decisions, the more difficult those decisions become. And if you don't address them, we will come to a head where we will actually crash, and fiscally, or back to your thing. I'll stop at your equitable thing. You see, of course, like you and I, or the four of us, we're different people. We try different things. We try at different levels, so the outcome will be different, right? So that's kind of fair. But if one of us is left behind, it's not really good for the remaining three of us. So what I'm trying to say, more equitable in terms of the floor should be higher. I think the floor, we must make sure that there is mobility, right? People who are born in the bottom 10%, the children is able to move up in the next generation. We have to ensure that.
Oh yeah,
now,
totally.
for them to be able to move up, they have to have a strong social safety net for them to happen. I know, Rajah came from very, he's proven himself. There is mobility. So we have to put a good, strong floor. That's what I meant. I don't mean that people put different efforts and get same outcome. But you have to give people a fair shake at the start of things. So yeah. Give a chance to Dr. Zunika and Rajah to say something. Yeah, okay, I'm disagreeing with you also on the equitable thing.
That's fine. So, Dr. Rajah, you want to answer that question then? Sorry, you're on mute also. Dr. Zu, you can unmute yourself. You don't have to stay on mute. Don't worry.
Okay. You can't possibly expect, even the Nobel laureates, people like Simon Kuznets, or even the more recent one from Banerjee from Harvard, they don't believe that there should be perfect, equitable sort of distribution. No, you can't possibly have that. And we know that looking at Russia until Glasnost came in, and then of course Deng Xiaoping came to remove the earlier system to introduce a reward system in China, which actually took place when Mao Zedong was still the chairman of CCP. But coming back to this point here, it is obvious from the point that Nung raised just now that you can't possibly have some fellow doing badly. But you do have situations where you can have a win-win situation, but not on key issues like whether you can just lower taxes the way the US does. Among developed countries, US has actually one of the lowest tax revenue to GDP ratio, which is about 26.6%. Okay. Compared to, say, the Nordic countries, which is close to 50%.
40 over.
Now, ours is, of course, much lower now, 11.05% the last. But let me mention that there are a whole lot of areas where we can improve because of the wastage that's going on with misconceived policies. For example, for some time, our government believed in the titisan ke bawah type of Rostovian model of trickling down theory of development, even claiming that Korea and Taiwan grew that way. That's not true at all. This is actually, during the Marshall Plan, already had redistribution clearly done. And then these countries achieved rapid growth, including rapid wage growth. Now, I think once we get that sort of thing clear, and then making, Dr. Zunika talked about progressive wages. I like that concept in the sense that you now have not just performance-based wages, you now have wages to motivate workers. This is very Fordist in its sense, to motivate workers, but you must ensure that there's performance.
Yeah, of course.
The kind, say, China introduced during Deng Xiaoping. Until then, poverty was extreme then. So my feeling, and that also should have a gateway for entrepreneurs to realize the creative selves. The kind of person we have, I think you mentioned about world-class drones. Understanding Kamarul, for example, one of the big guys in drone services. Yep. Now you'll understand that if entrepreneurship is actually opened up in that sort of way, and the youths are connected with that, then you can actually see that there will be a mobilization of people in that direction. But what is important here is, I think we need to buy in the civil servants first. Convince them. Don't blame them as yet. Convince them that this is the way to go, and use the term empathy strongly. Empathy must be very strong in seeing that their interest is the interest of the government, and all the way show that. So I think then we can mobilize people, and it will snowball. In my understanding, it will snowball into having a rallying cry that this is the right way to go, and people actively participating rather than just what we call in Malay sindir. You start questioning and show our sarcasm towards it. My own feeling, communication is key.
Oh, okay. Interesting, huh? Can boil down to that. Okay. Hey, I want to bring in Dr. Zhu, because there's an interesting question from Rosaini, right, Dr. Zhu? And she's asking actually, what is the status of Malaysian women under the 12th Malaysia plan currently? So, and where the gaps, kind of interesting. So I'm hoping that you can answer this in a very concise and sharp manner with data also.
Yeah, thank you for the question. Women has been long an issue in Malaysia. Dr. Nong mentioned just now that the economic Madani, that we want to go into as high as 60%. Right now, we are about 55.5% in terms of participation rate of women in the labor force. And the government is trying to improve this participation rate by looking at the root cause of why women is not in the labor force. Is it because of the choice they've made due to family reason, or is it because of the job type of factor? So we are trying, in fact, looking into what could be the best incentive or programs that we can put forward under the midterm review in order to increase participation of women in order to achieve that long-term target.
Okay. And then are there any specific gaps you see, the second part of this question, that currently, when you're making the review, are there any clear gaps or no? Which would be a good thing? Like, if you see any significant gaps, then that's not a good sign.
In terms of the gap, one that I can provide example actually is in terms of in the participation of women in the decision making.
Oh,
there are still
C-level, like the C-suite, is it? Okay.
Yes, there is still a huge gap in ensuring that women can also be part of the decision making process.
Okay, so that one policy can address that lah. Okay.
Yeah.
So there's actually I want to just go to another question from who's anonymous, right? But just asking about, and probably
you're lost.
Our plans, right, get assessed at the end of the period based on the actual performance, right, versus projections. And then more important is what is the result, when the targets are not met? So is there accountability? And accountability meaning then, like, budgets get cut because you didn't do a good job over the last 5 years, so you're going to get less? Or is there some other form of accountability?
In terms of setting up the target for the 12th Malaysia plan, when we did the target last time, it was actually it is expectation that ministry and agency can put up their programs and project in order to achieve that target. And we take note that that target was set with the assumption that things will be going this way. So when we have all the challenges throughout the 2 years, the COVID-19 impact, the slowdown in the international market, as well as the challenges in also looking at the prices, the pressure on the prices. So in terms of accountability, we cannot say that this is due to the failure of the government or failure of any specific ministry, because it's external factor in nature.
Okay.
So that is the reason why we need to review the target and to see whether we can introduce a new way of circumventing the circumstances in addressing the issue that arise. So we have KPI, no doubt, in terms of looking at whether this actually is achieved or not. But KPI actually is set not to be punishable in nature, but it actually is to nudge proper behavior
hopefully there's
agencies.
Like in corporate world, they like to use the word stretch, especially in MNCs that give you a stretch target, right? So you have to go above. So hopefully the KPIs are stretch targets and not comfortable ones. But they actually, Dr. Zhu, I want to stay with you because I think somebody had asked a question beforehand, right? And this is a professor from the French University, right? Elsa. And she's asked about how do you analyze the role of labor and the room for labor issues in the 12th Malaysia Plan. And now, according to the midterm review.
Yeah, I think one of the big issues that we are trying to address in the midterm review is in terms of making sure that our labor market is more efficient.
More efficient.
And the root cause, one of the root cause in terms of the supply side actually is in terms of looking at the quality of our students, the quality of our education system. So this is on the supply side.
Yeah.
So on the demand side, we are looking at issue mismatch between the output produced and the demand from the industry. And even before the midterm review, we have also embarked on a few pilot projects in terms of like academic in industry program introduced to ensure that we can take on board right away industries together with the government in making sure that the student that we want to put in the industry actually are qualified according to the need of the industry. And as we mentioned before, in terms of the wage, we are looking into the progressive wage on top of the minimum wage policy that is already in existence. And besides that, in the 12th Malaysia Plan, there is also a mention on the multi-tier levy. And this is also one of the areas that we'll be looking at as well.
Okay. I think there is I'm just going to have a question for both our two doctors now, although you are also a doctor, but the two economic doctors. But before that, just to share, I was actually, yesterday I had a call with a trainer and a staff who's in a German company in Penang. And because they have their own, the German program, right? Dual mode program. And this is, they have a 3-year program where you join the company and then they will train you up, right? And when you come out, it's called an advanced diploma. And then this person and one of the staff went through this advanced diploma. And he said that then I think a few months ago, there was a mechatronics graduate, right, who joined them. And the graduate was asking him, and a university, right, one of our universities. And because this guy was trained not in the mechatronics space, but he kept asking him a lot of questions. And this guy who's already working, not the student, right? He said that the student was asking me, how come you know so many things about so many other areas? And he said, because I spent the last 3 years, right, in the company, right, learning on the job with my hands and my eyes and my feet, right, instead of you in the classroom. And I think, Doctor, you mentioned that, Dr. Zhu, so shouldn't we just encourage a lot more of that, like almost, and you guys have a powerful lever, right? The funding for universities, I could be totally wrong here, right? For the funding, and we'll do a pilot, right? The top 4, research universities, a portion of your budget, will only be given, right, when we see that you switch a lot more of your programs, right? Not for all, but maybe in engineering, maybe even in economics, right? Why not, right? Where you have to switch some into this, industry-based learning. That'll be amazing, right? You can trigger it so fast instead of asking the university senate to debate and come back and push back and forth. What do you think of that? Because it can be done. It has to be done fast, right? Because the need is now.
Yeah, I think this is something that we are working on right now. In making sure that we can match what industry want, as well as making sure that the higher learning institution also adjust their program to ensure that they can match the industry without the government coming in to top up the skill produced from this higher learning institution. So let's hope that we can get a larger response from companies because for our industry in industry in academy program.
Yeah.
We are targeting 1,000 companies to participate. So let's just hope that this can be enlarged.
And I hope among the companies, I think Dr. Nu mentioned some you should allocate some for SMEs also, right? Because I know the larger companies can do this because they've got the resources and they know it works. Whereas your
SMEs, most of them are SMEs.
Right.
Karamjit, yeah. Rafizi's program here, go on.
Yes.
Oh, the Rafizi, yeah, correct. He's pushing that now, yeah. But okay, hey, it looks like I want to ask the two of you, right, a question about, because we're running out of time and because this is getting a lot of airplay and airtime and also you know, column inches to use a print media term, right? But about progressive wages, right? It's quite brave and it's interesting to do, and because it's still new in the Malaysian context. So maybe Dr. Nung first, are there countries, have there developing countries that have successfully utilized this, you know, as a way to kind of like level more the playing field in terms of labor force and social equity? And then Dr. Rajah, you can answer this also with your thoughts.
No, I think progressive wages, minimum wages are legislative or regulatory intervention in the markets, right? You do it. I mean, minimum wage is hard statutory legislative punya intervention. Progressive wages is perhaps more not so heavy because it has to be accompanied by some sort of productivity growth. Otherwise, you're going to kill off firms, right?
Yeah.
But what I think I would like to elaborate, the real solution to the longer term solution to wages, the issue of wages is actually one is Dr. Zunika has alluded to on the splash that she said she didn't mention foreign labor, but I think the major distortion in the labor market is actually the way we price labor, especially foreign labor, because the pricing mechanism is false because firms are allowed to hire foreign labor at cost below, at the same level of skill below what they would hire domestic workers. So you need to remove that distortion, apply all labor laws equally to all labor, then use what Dr. Zunika said, the multi-tier levy system to price discriminate or price labor in the sectors that you want to promote productivity or capital investment. So I think that's the longer term solution. And I think the other thing is actually, given the demand, the level of demand characterized by somewhat low household income in the country, we need to actually have more firms that actually have access to external demand to actually change the dynamics of the nature of the firms and therefore their cost curve, their profits, and therefore the amount of wages they can pay.
Interesting. Dr. Rajah, you're right.
Yeah. I think all the studies that I've seen, statistical studies would show that foreign labor actually reduces wages of Malaysian workers. To be expected because the supply curve just moves on the right, lowering the acceptable wage for people. Now, coming to this point here, the important things that need to be addressed. One, at the university level, if you're looking at a business school like the Sloan School of Management, 50% of the time is spent in the firm. 50%. 50% of the time is spent in the firm. And in many areas, these courses are taught in incubators that are linked to firms. Now, the same framework is done in Sweden, in the Vinnova framework. Now, we don't seem to be doing that. Second, when I was doing this study for the World Bank in the early 90s, the mismatch was already obvious. At that time, the lack of skills from your job task, which is mechatronics, precision engineering, tooling, and all those kinds of things had very little demand. Students who enrolled in these polytechnics, 70% of them were doing commerce. There's serious market failure here because in the interviews that we had, it's easier to pass the commerce course and somehow they find jobs elsewhere, while the other guys fail too much. Or it's just like, I remember a student from UK, physics department, very little enrollment. It has a deterrent effect, because what they have gone through is, you have juniors in schools, according to them, who were that much inferior to them, including their own classmates, have become managers. And these guys fail several times, go out with general degrees, which may also explain why enrollment in STEM courses are falling. There's a trend fall in enrollment in STEM courses, science, technology, engineering, mathematics, and medicine. Now, coming back to this TVET thing, I have PhD students working in that area. Now we need digital competence. We need so many other things now. There must be an important way of connecting them. It should not just be in those classrooms. The problem I find is, you talk to a polytechnic, talk to a technical school, they claim that they are demand-driven on the basis of enrollment. Demand actually refers to markets, refer to relative prices. Now, if it means the final employer is not hiring, which is what the firms tell me, that's how it should be captured. And then that market failure should be resolved. It's resolved in the US and in Germany, the dual training system, by having the training from Hopper Institute, for example, training right there as they're studying. Now, to me, unless they do these things or an adapted version of it so that we are happy that we can call it Malaysian, I think we may not solve this deficit.
Understood. There is interesting, because Dr. Zu talked about the talent and mismatch, but we can go on and on about that. But look, we're at the end of our conversation actually, but before I ask each of you for your 45 seconds key takeaway, right, which means that basically for the audience, we are the key takeaway is the one thing they want you to leave with. If you forgot everything in the last 1 hour, what was the one thing each of them want you to leave with? But before that, Dr. Zu, there is an interesting question from Cassie Lee, right, who said that the 12th plan was formulated by different government, and asking if there were specific instructions given to bureaucrats for how the current government wants to focus or prioritize. So is that a question you're comfortable answering?
I think the nature of doing policy document or coming out with policy actually is looking into what is the way forward or the directive from the government that is in power. So as we go along, when we have our formulation of any policy, we have to take into account the direction that is given or the way forward that is put to drive the economic development for the country. So that is the principle that is been undertaken or practiced in Malaysia actually.
And so basically what you're saying is that whichever government comes in, they may have certain areas that they want to focus on, right?
Yes.
But then they will express that to you all, right, to the KSU or whatever, and then you all have to, to maybe reallocate forces, or okay, this is more important than some of the others, so focus a bit more on that. It's not like they say cut this, cut that, cut that. So because I think Dr. Nung said also that all the governments have got good policy, they want to move the country forward, right? Okay.
Yes.
All right. With that now, I'm going to have you last now, Dr. Zu, but we're going to do just our key takeaway. And when we finish, there'll be a closing video playing. So for some of you who have questions that have not been answered, the panelists will stay on to answer your questions. If you have a few more questions to ask, please quickly type those in and our panelists will. Dr. Nung, you first, right? What is the key takeaway for you? No, not Rajah. Hold on. Maybe Dr. Nung first. What is your key takeaway for the audience?
It's all in the doing. And the doing is painful sometimes, not all just joy.
Yeah, of course. Okay, short and sweet. It's all in doing. Okay, Dr. Rajah?
Yeah, we use the word Madani, and I hope the government will bring that so that we are one Malaysia, showing that every single person in the country is part of Malaysia. Thank you.
Oh, fantastic. Okay, Doctor, you're still in the Merdeka mood, man, and Hari Malaysia Day coming up. Excellent. Dr. Zu, your key takeaway for the audience?
Yeah, I think my what I would like to put upon actually is that we have to embark on doing things as one Malaysia. we need to do it together, and with that, we can ensure that we can fulfill what we want.
And reduce inequalities wherever they exist, like as best as we can. Okay, great. Thank you very much for your participation. And thank you all who are listening. We've had more people since we started joining. Thank you all for the privilege of your time. Thank you to the panelists. And now we're going to end this show. And hopefully after the midterm review is done, maybe Dr. Zhu will come on again with some other panelists and we can talk again about what that open direction will be also, right? That'll be a fantastic follow-on. Thank you all, and we'll see you again soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.